Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my very late April and May wrap up. I think I read 19 books in total, including graphic novels, and I read 1 literary fiction, 5 graphic novels, 12 romances, and 1 mystery thriller. And I'm gonna try and go through these fairly quickly because there are so many. I'm gonna try and not yap on for too long. The first thing I read in April was I reread the Heartstopper series. Well, I reread the first 3 and then I read the 4th and 5th ones for the first time. I don't have a copy of the 5th one yet. I have to get it. I read it on my phone. And these are just the best books ever. I am so obsessed with them. They're graphic novels and they're also really heavy, so I'm gonna put them down. But they are a series of graphic novels and the central story is a romance between Nick and Charlie. And Charlie is out. He got outed at school and has dealt with a lot of bullying and things since then, and he meets Charlie, and Charlie is straight. He's like a rugby lad and they become friends and their friendship eventually becomes a romance. And it is just the most wholesome romance ever, and there's just so much great representation in these books. There's all kinds of sexualities. There's lesbian characters, bi characters, gay characters, asexual characters, there's a trans character. There's also so much mental health representation. Definitely check the trigger warnings because it does get pretty dark there in like the middle of the series, but it is just so good. I'm literally obsessed with them. I wish I could tuck every character into bed and give them a kiss on the forehead. They just mean so much to me. And this is the kind of book I wish I had when I was a teenager. I can't believe I had to learn about all these things from fan fictions off Archive of Our Own, and teenagers now get books like this. They are just so good. Highly recommend. There is also a TV show version on Netflix and it's a really good adaptation. I really like the show as well, but definitely check out the graphic novels too if you haven't. Then I did another reread. I reread Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I am just not myself if I don't reread an Emily Henry book every 6 to 8 weeks, so this is the one I chose. Book Lovers is a romance between Nora and also Charlie. Yes, Nora and Charlie. And Nora is the girlfriend that always gets dumped in the small town Hallmark movies. You know how the big city guy, like lawyer or whatever, goes to a small town and ends up falling in love with like the innkeeper's daughter or a Christmas tree farm heiress, and the serious businesswoman big city girlfriend gets dumped. She's the big city girlfriend. It's happened to her like 3 or 4 times, but she's just not a small town girl. She loves her job, her career, she loves the city, but her little sister Libby is really pregnant and also already has 2 kids, I think, and she just needs a break, and she's obsessed with this small town because it's from a book that one of Nora's clients wrote. Nora is a literary agent, so Libby convinces her to go spend a month in this small town in North Carolina, and when she gets there she runs into Charlie Lasher, who is a book editor, and they had one very ill-fated business lunch a few years before, and so they just do not get along, and the romance is between them. And I just love this book. You guys know I love all of Emily Henry's books, so it's not shocking, but this is one of my favorites and I feel like it's a little underrated. I don't feel like I see a lot of people have this one at like the top of their list, but it's so good in my opinion. Perfect small town vibes. I love Nora. She's the epitome of oldest sibling, oldest sister. I mean, I'm an only child, so maybe I shouldn't say that, but I love that she's so unapologetically herself, and I love that Charlie is just obsessed with her anyway. And something I love in a romance that Emily Henry does so well is she lets her characters flirt with each other, and I feel like that is actually not done enough in romance books. Like, they just have such good chemistry and banter and like flirt with each other so much, and I just love them so much. And this is when I entered, or I guess re-entered, my Mariana Zapata era. I read 2 of her books. She is the queen of a slow burn romance, and I love a slow burn. I read Wait For It, which follows Diana, and she has custody of her 2 nephews, so she's a single mother, and she moves into a new house in a new neighborhood and ends up meeting one of her neighbors, and he doesn't really like her at first. They don't really get along for, honestly, in my opinion, an annoying reason, but whatever, he comes around and the romance is between them. He also is the coach for the nephew's baseball team. I eat up any book with the single parent trope. I just love it so much. And when he does warm up to her, I was like actually getting butterflies. That's the thing with the slow burn. It's like, it just makes it so much more satisfying when you get to the romance and the flirty scenes because you've waited so long. I will say though, the beginning of this book did drag a little bit for me. I feel like something that Mariana Zapata does is she just makes her books very detailed, which sometimes I like, but I felt like in this one it was a little bit too much of just like stuff I didn't really care about, and it was very repetitive. But once I got past that, I started to really enjoy it. I also love a good friends to lovers, and he is an acts of service king, like on par with Ryan Shea. He's mowing her lawn for her, he's taking care of the boys, he is just Stepping Up, which I also love, and I ended up really enjoying this. I think it's my second favorite Mariana Zapata, just because I don't think anything is gonna top All Roads Lead Here for me, but I did really enjoy this. Then I read another Mariana Zapata, From Lukov with Love. Is that it? I always get it wrong. From Lukov with Love. Is that what I said? This is an ice skating romance. The main character, Jasmine, is a figure skater, and she was a pair skater, but something happened, I forget, and she sort of fell off and doesn't have a partner, so she's just teaching skating lessons at her local rink, and she ends up being paired with Ivan Lukov, who is a very famous gold medal winning figure skater, but they don't get along. It's also her best friend's brother, and so they grew up together going to the rink and seeing each other at their friend's house, and they just don't really get along, and they end up paired together anyway. I did enjoy the romance in this, but I will say this was not my favorite, and it wasn't so much the romance or the characters. I think it was just the way this one was written. I don't know if this is maybe an earlier book or something, but it's just something about the writing style just didn't work for me. I felt like it was a lot of tell and not show. Like, she would talk about things that were gonna happen, and I'd be really excited to read those scenes. Like, one example is she gets sick or something, I forget, and she is gonna spend a few days at his house while she recovers, and I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be so fun, a little forced proximity, like, it's gonna take care of her, whatever. And then they sort of just like skip the actual scenes where that was happening. They just like flash forward a few days. So there's a lot of stuff like that, and I just felt like there were so many potential scenes that could be so good that just weren't in there. I also think I expected it to be a little bit more high stakes because they're competitive figure skaters. I was sort of expecting them to be traveling around and doing competitions and just very high stakes, which in actuality they're just rehearsing, and there's only one competition at the end of the book, which is totally on me. I just assumed that it would be a little bit different. That was also something I was kind of disappointed in. And actually, one thing about the romance I wasn't obsessed with was, even though it's a slow burn, I felt like her feelings came out of nowhere. Like, they truly just felt like friends and partners for so long, and then all of a sudden she was like, wait, I like him. And I wish we got a little bit more of her realizing that she has feelings for him, because it did kind of feel like it came out of nowhere. Overall, it wasn't bad, just not one of my favorites. Then I read Wild Love by Elsie Silver. This is her newest release. Elsie Silver wrote the Chestnut Spring series, which is a series of cowboy romances that I've read a bunch of and really liked. And now this is her new series, and they're all single dad romances, which I'm obsessed with that concept because, like I said, I love single parent books. This is between Rosie and Ford, and Rosie and Ford grew up together because Ford is Rosie's brother's best friend. Now it's years later, they both left their town. Rosie is kind of going through it. She loses her job and is sort of like on a break with her boyfriend, so she goes home for the summer, and Ford is also home because he's a billionaire, but all he wants to do is produce music. So he's at home building a recording studio on his property, and he's, like I said, a single dad. Although the single parent trope in this one is a lot different than how it normally is. I don't want to spoil it, but the way that comes about I thought was really interesting, and I appreciate that it was a little bit different than normal. But I have to be honest, this one again was not a favorite of mine. Oh, I forgot to say, she also ends up working for him. So he's trying to start his recording studio, record label, and he hires her to help him. There were things I liked about this. I loved Ford. He was one of those male main characters that literally 15 pages in, I just loved him like instantly. And there's also a side plot with her high school diary that I thought was really sweet, and he had a crush on her when they were teenagers, so I like that aspect of it. It was really sweet, but I just felt like this was missing something. I don't know what it was. I just couldn't get fully invested in the romance and in these characters, and I found that I was kind of bored for some of this. I also hated their first kiss scene, which is so sad because I feel like that is something you always look forward to when you're reading a romance, is the first kiss scene. And I personally just hated theirs. I did think the spicy scenes in this were pretty good, but overall, like I said, it was just missing something, and it just was not a fave of mine, unfortunately. But after I read this, I was still in the mood for like an Elsie Silver and like a cowboy romance. This actually, Wild Love, is like not a cowboy romance at all. They live on a ranch by a lake, but he is like not a cowboy at all, and neither is she. But it put me in the mood for a cowboy romance, so I decided to read Reckless by Elsie Silver. This is part of the Chestnut Spring series, which I mentioned before, but it was one of the ones I hadn't read yet. And hear me out, this is an accidental pregnancy romance. I know, I normally hate this trope so much, but I actually loved this. I think I'm learning, if I go into the book knowing it's accidental pregnancy, I like it a lot more than when it's just thrown in at the end. Because I also read Out on a Limb earlier this year, which is also accidental pregnancy, and also loved that one. So the trope is growing on me. This one follows Winter, which, if you have read any of the Chestnut Spring series, is the sister of the main character from the first book, Powerless. No, I can never get these books names straight. Flawless. She is the sister of the main character in Flawless. And basically the plot is that Winter is kind of estranged from her sister, but they are starting to try and have a relationship again. So she ends up getting invited to, I think, Christmas dinner, some sort of holiday dinner, where she runs into Theo, the love interest, because he's also invited. He's like a family friend, and they end up having a one-night stand and she gets pregnant. There's also another thing in the beginning of this that had me gooped. I'm not gonna say what it is, but just something about the way it went down was a lot different than I was expecting, so that was really fun. I didn't think I was gonna like Winter because when you see her in the other books, she kind of sucks, but I actually ended up really liking her. I really liked her story arc and her character development, and I grew to really like her. She also has a pretty serious backstory with her ex-husband, which is also mentioned in the previous books, but is really glossed over, which was always weird to me. But finally in this book they get more into it, which I appreciated, because I was like, this is so serious, why are we just glossing over this? But I think it's so that they could unpack it in this book. The love interest in this, Theo Silva, the man that you are, I am obsessed with him. He's, I think, also a bull rider, which is what most of the men in this series are. I loved him so much. He was everything, truly. I literally have in my notes, love Theo bad. Like, I really just loved him so much. Perfect male main character. And this book overall was just such a pleasant surprise. I think it's my second favorite Elsie Silver after Heartless. I just loved this so much. Then we had National Emily Henry Day. Her new release Funny Story came out. I literally look forward to this day like it's Christmas. I get so excited. Kind of like how in Book Lovers she shows the other side to the trope of big city girl gets dumped for small town girl. In this book she shows the other point of view of when childhood best friends become lovers. And I just love that she does that. I think it's so creative. Oh my god, I feel like my Invisalign lisp is really bad right now. This book follows Daphne and Miles, and their partners are the childhood best friends who realize they're in love with each other. So now they're both single, and Daphne has nowhere to live because her fiance just left her and kicked her out. So she ends up living with Miles since he is also recently single. So it is roommate trope, which is really fun. I don't think I've actually read a roommate romance before. I've read like Marriage of Convenience, but not roommate, so that was really fun. And before I get into it, I just want to say Emily Henry could literally write the dictionary and I would probably enjoy it. Even my least favorite of her books I like more than a lot of other books, but this one is not my favorite from her, unfortunately. I did like Daphne and Miles as characters and as a couple. A lot of people were saying they weren't attracted to Miles. Literally can't relate at all. He is like if Nick Miller was not grumpy and had tattoos. Literally find me this man in real life. But I did feel like this book was a little bit more surface level than a lot of her other books. There was also kind of a lot going on plot wise. I felt like she was trying to juggle. Daphne is a librarian and she has this big readathon at the end of the summer, and after that she wants to move away, and Miles wants her to stay, so he ends up taking her on these outings so that she can appreciate town and not want to move away. And then they also both have family issues that they're dealing with. Miles's sister is in the story a lot, and then Daphne's dad comes, and it felt like a lot and kind of out of place. I think I realized something about her earlier books, like her first 3 books, that I really like is that they're a lot more intimate. There are obviously always side characters, but for the most part it's just the couple, and they are usually isolated in some way, and I think I prefer that. Whereas Happy Place and Funny Story just have a bigger cast of characters and there's more going on, and I just don't think I like that as much, because I think just in general I like my romances to be a little bit more intimate anyway. I also felt like this is the first book by her that felt similar to another one of her books. I feel like her books before this all stood out to each other. They all had very different plots, and this one kind of felt like I was reading Beach Read. Obviously different, but similar enough that I was comparing them in my head, which just sucks because I like that all her books kind of stand on their own, and I didn't like that I felt like I was reading a Beach Read knockoff. But like I said, overall I did really enjoy it. I love her writing. She always writes beautifully. I liked the characters. I cried at the end. But I do think it is my least favorite of hers. The first 2 books in May I actually read for a reading vlog where I read new release romances. And I read The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren and The Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. So I'm not going to go too in-depth in these books just because I have talked about them already. So if you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts and reactions, you can go and watch that reading vlog. The Paradise Problem sort of does what I was talking about how Emily Henry does, was earlier sort of shows a different perspective of a popular trope. So Anna and Liam get married. They have a marriage of convenience so that they can get family student housing at UCLA because it's cheaper. A marriage of convenience, but they don't fall in love at the end. I mean, they do, but you know what I mean. They're essentially just roommates. They meet the day in court that they get married, and then they're just roommates. He's getting his PhD, so he's not really around a lot. They have separate bedrooms. They honestly barely know each other, even though they are married. And Anna actually thinks they got divorced, but they didn't. They had to stay married for 5 years so that Liam could get his inheritance. He comes from a really wealthy family. They own a chain of grocery stores, I believe. And now, even though they haven't seen each other in years, to keep the ruse going, she goes with him to his little sister's wedding, which is on a private island in the Philippines, I think. Or Singapore? I think it was the Philippines. Indonesia. Okay, it was in Indonesia. This book was kind of giving Succession in a way. The family is very strained, and the dad is like very powerful and tough and wants him to take over the family company, but he doesn't want to. And I did like the romance. I thought it was fun. They have a really nice like flirty banter going on. They have good chemistry, and I loved that it was set on a private island like this. I love books like that, but I did just think it focused a little too much on the family dynamics and not enough on the relationship. But it was a really fun romance, perfect for the summer or if you're about to go on a trip. Then I read This Summer Will Be Different. This is a romance between Lucy and Felix, and Lucy is in Prince Edward Island because her best friend is from there, and they're supposed to be taking a trip together, but her best friend ends up missing her flight, so she's there for the night alone, and she meets somebody at a restaurant, and they have a one-night stand, and it turns out that that man is her best friend's brother, who she was given explicit details to not fall in love with. I sort of struggled with this one. I could not get into it at all for the first half. I just thought it was boring, and their connection felt very physical, and there just really wasn't anything going on, and it was just like, oh, I shouldn't hook up with him because Bridget, that's the best friend and the sister, will be mad, but he's just so hot, so I'm gonna do it anyway. And it was not doing it for me. But halfway through, it did turn around, and I did start enjoying it a lot more. A lot more stuff started to actually happen, and there were a lot more scenes where I felt like they had a true connection that wasn't just physical, and I just got more invested into them as characters. Specifically Miles. I liked Lucy pretty much the whole time, but I felt like in the beginning Miles kind of had no personality, but then you see more of him, and he is really sweet and thoughtful and just a nice guy. I have a crush on him. I don't think I even explained that this is dual timeline. You get them for the 5 previous summers from when they originally meet to the present timeline, and now the best friend, sister Bridget, is having a crisis and is like, I need you guys to come to the island and spend time with me. I'm going through it, but she doesn't tell them why. So you're getting the past summers and then this current trip. And even though I did like the second half, I just struggled a little too much in the beginning, so I think I ended up giving this like 3, maybe 3.5 stars. But can I just say, if you're familiar with Carly Fortune's books, the trope that she loves to put in there is not in there, thank God. Then I read At Same Time Next Summer. You can tell that the weather was getting warmer because I just could not get enough of the summer romances. This one has the classic summer romance plot of girl has a beach house or a lake house, and they move there, and the neighbor is a cute boy her age, and they grow up together and fall in love, and then they break up, and now it's years later and they're both back at the beach, and of course they're gonna fall in love again, which, don't get me wrong, is a trope I literally love so much and I will eat it up every single time. But it does sort of have that like classic plot. It's set on Long Island, and he ends up moving away to California to pursue music, and she moves to the city, or she's from the city. This is her summer house, and so she stays in the city, and she's now engaged, and she's going back to Long Island to see if they maybe want to have their wedding there. And you know how these things go, you know, it's a romance, they fall in love. But I really enjoyed this one. I really liked her writing style, and like I said, this is just a trope that I love. I feel like I've read so many books like this, but it just does it for me every time. They're just always so fun and summery, and I love a dual timeline, second chance romance situation. I really liked both characters. I will say something I don't love in a romance is when the main character is taken at the beginning, like, you know, engaged or has a boyfriend or whatever. Even though there's no cheating, it does just feel a little bit weird to me, so I could have done without that. But I did really enjoy it, and I definitely will be reading more of her books because I really liked the way it was written. Then I read Love Interest. This is a workplace rivals romance set in New York City. Casey is up for this promotion, but she doesn't get it, and she finds out the guy who did get it is the son of someone who's on the board, so she's really mad. She thinks it's nepotism, and just on site is like, I don't like you. But they end up having to do this YouTube series they work for a magazine. It's very reminiscent of Vogue or BuzzFeed, a magazine that also has a website and a YouTube channel and does different stuff like that. So they end up having to work together on a YouTube series, and they become friends from doing that together. And she's trying to get promoted. She wants to get transferred to a different office, and he's trying to prove himself and prove that he is not just a nepo baby. And I really liked this, and I feel like the same thing happened with Same Time Next Summer. I love when I go into a book with like no expectations. I feel like because I watch so much book content and I'm on Goodreads and everything like that, it's rare that I go into books with no expectations. But this was one of those instances. I saw I think one person talking about it and said they really liked it, but other than that I had never heard of it, and I ended up really liking this one. I love books that are set in the city. I liked the workplace part of it. It's friends to lovers, and I thought they had a really cute friendship foundation before it kind of got romantic. And this is definitely underrated. I would recommend checking it out because I really enjoyed it. And I read Night Shift. I think this was a Wattpad book first, and now it's on Kindle Unlimited, which I didn't realize until I was reading it. But I was in the mood for a sports romance, and specifically a college romance. I don't know why, I just had a very specific craving to read a book like that, so I just found this on Kindle Unlimited. Main character Kendall works in the school library, and then one night the star basketball player, really famous on campus, comes into the library, and they end up making out between the stacks of books, and then from there they see each other again, they get together. This is one of those books that's fun until you start thinking about it too much. It's definitely insta love. The miscommunication trope goes crazy. Also, the timeline of this relationship is literally insane. I'm not exaggerating. They literally hang out 3 times before the big third act breakup. I also thought the pacing was off. Like I said, they literally hang out 3 times, and then there's the third act conflict, but the third act conflict actually happens at like 50%, and then they make up, and the last like 30% of the book is just smut. Part of the plot is that she is inexperienced. I think it was to show her like losing it and whatever, but it just felt weird because I felt like the book should be over, and then it was just 60 pages of them hooking up, which I just could have done without. So I can't say it was the best book I've ever read, but it was what I was in the mood for, and I wanted something I could sort of just sit down and read in one sitting, which I did. So even though it's not a favorite, it was fun for the moment, and it was what I wanted. You know, it was a fun way to spend 3 hours. Then I went and saw Challengers, which I was obsessed with, and I immediately came home and downloaded Carrie Soto Is Back. I am aware that I am a cliche. It's okay. Carrie Soto Is Back is a literary fiction by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It does have a little bit of romance, but it mainly follows Carrie Soto, who was a childhood tennis prodigy. She won every match, every Grand Slam. She was the best tennis player in the world. She won more, I think it's Grand Slams, than anybody else in the world, and she's retired, but someone comes and beats her Grand Slam record, so she decides to come out of retirement and play a season to try and get her record back. This book is very tennis heavy, which I thought was going to bother me considering I've literally never played a game of tennis in my life, but it ended up being pretty interesting. So basically between this and Challengers, I'm a professional tennis player. This is also dual timeline, so you get her when she was younger, her whole life playing, and then now, and her dad is also her coach, which I thought was an interesting storyline. And something I appreciate about Taylor Jenkins Reid is that her characters always seem very real and they're flawed, and I really liked the character development that she had, and her story arc, and the things that she realizes, and the discussions of success and what that means. It did get a little repetitive in the middle. Again, like I said, very tennis heavy, and I felt like there was a chunk in the middle where it was like just tennis and matches, and there wasn't really much else going on, where I thought it dragged a little bit, but overall I did enjoy it. Then I guess I wasn't done with my sports romance era, because then I read Behind the Net. This is a hockey romance. They're both from the same hometown, and they both had a crush on each other in high school, but you know, when you're younger and you have a crush on somebody, just because you see them in the hallways and you think they're cute, even though you haven't actually ever spoken to them, that's kind of what they had going on. Like, they both had a crush on each other, but they never actually like spoke or anything. And now he's in the NHL, and he hires a live-in assistant, and it ends up being her. This was enjoyable. I liked both characters. I liked the love interest. I did think they had a sweet romance. Again, I was in the mood for a sports romance, so that was good. I liked seeing her go to her hockey games and him like traveling around and stuff. That was fun. But there were some things I didn't love about it. I think in general it was just too long, and a lot of it dragged, specifically the second half, because they get together kind of early, and then a lot of the second half is just spicy scenes, which I'm just not a fan of that. I prefer more of a slow burn, and just smutty scenes in general I could take or leave. So I felt like specifically the second half dragged. I also just think I'm in the minority, because I was seeing this book all over TikTok, and I think a lot of people really love it. So I would definitely give it a shot if you've been thinking about reading it. It just wasn't my favorite personally. Then finally, lastly, I read The Reappearance of Rachel Price, Holly Jackson, who wrote A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This is her new release. This is a YA mystery and it follows Belle, and when she was 2 years old, her mother disappeared. Her and her mom, Rachel Price, they were out spending the day together, and then police found Belle alone in the car on the side of the road, abandoned, and they were never able to find out what happened. There was never a body found or anything. Now Belle is, I think, 18, and they're filming a documentary, and while they're filming the documentary, her mom reappears. I didn't like this, guys. I'm sorry. I thought the plot was really interesting and I was really excited to read about it, but this book just wasn't for me. I thought it was way too long. I think this is like over 400 pages, which was just so unnecessary in my opinion. I literally wrote in my notes 5 minutes of her going through the trash, literally. Like, that's how drawn out it was. Like, there is literally a scene where she's looking for clues and she's digging in the trash, and it is like 6 pages of her looking through the garbage. There's a romance side plot that, boo, I just did not like at all. It just was unnecessary, and I felt like they had a really weird dynamic, and I just was not into it at all. I also thought Belle as a character was a little hard to swallow. I understand that she has been through it and that this is a very like traumatic thing that's happening to her, but she just like needed to chill, I fear. Like, she was going in. She was not nice to literally anybody in this book. She was just so, like, the plot is like her mom comes back and she's convinced that her mom disappeared on purpose and everything, and she's trying to prove that, which is valid, you know. Obviously you come back after 16 years and you like can't really tell anyone what happened. It's weird, but I was like, damn girl, give her the benefit of the doubt for 1 second. Jeez. And yeah, it was just way too long. You know when you're reading a thriller or a mystery and clues start being uncovered and it starts to pick up and you're like, great, okay, I'm almost at the end, we're gonna find out what happens soon. I had that feeling at 60%. And just overall, the way it ended, the twist, I just really was not a fan of it. I think I gave it 2.5 stars, which is fair because like I finish it. I feel like if I finish a book, it's automatically at least 2 stars usually, just because if I really hate a book, I just will DNF it. But it was like the more I thought about this book, the more I didn't like it, unfortunately. So that one was definitely not for me. But honestly, overall, besides that, I had a pretty good 2 months of reading. I feel like I have strep throat from talking so much. Let me know in the comments what you guys read in April or May. Books you loved, books you hated. I want to hear about it. Like and subscribe, all that fun stuff if you want to. If you want to find me anywhere else, I'll have all my other social medias down below as always. And thank you so much for watching.